And the Lord said, Go out to the highways and hedges, and compel them to come in, that my house might be filled. The call is for real ministry. So to my fellow ministers, where you at? My people dying out on the streets, killing each other senselessly. Prisons are filled with family. So many babies, so little food to eat. Another mother grieves today, 'cause a baby boy, he was killed by a gangster's stray. Preachers, teachers, and real ministers, where you at? The hungry, the empty, compel them to come in.
Counts the stars, one and all, knows how much sand is on the shore.
Welcome to Let's Talk About It. What are you doing? I'm your host, Apostle Dr. Lois Sulyans-Gibson, up here in the wonderful big sky country of Billings, Montana. Today's edition is with Living History, Miss Gwen Kircher. I met her via Facebook about a year and a half ago, when God gave me that word, I need you to do an Abraham journey. And so I reached out and found her, because you know, when you come into a community and there's only 1% black, you need some support. I don't care what nobody's saying. But what I love about Gwen, she's living history. I've sat down with her on several occasions, and she told me about the black history here in the state of Montana, which I had never had a clue of. And on this show, we're going to talk about one of the women. I'm going to get some of the photos that she has so we can really share this, because it is very important that we, as black people, know our history. It is very important that no one can sit up there and try to impact on our self-esteem and self-worth to make us feel that we're less than. Because I know that I am a fabulous woman of God. I don't pay nobody attention because I'm covered by the blood. And I know God has told me that I am wonderfully and fearfully made. And that I have learned to love He Lois. If you don't love me, it's okay. I'm good. But I thank God for those that I've met on this journey in life that are just awesome and that help me celebrate me as I celebrate them. So I'm going to turn this over to Gwen and let her share as the Lord leads her to share on the history of black women here in Montana.
Well, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you.
Well, it's been a while since I have done any performances. I do a performance called Ebony Prairie Women, where I talk about 3 women that were here in Montana at the turn of the 20th century. All of my research involves women at the turn of the 20th century that were single that came to Montana. I did not want to research about the married women because, you know, their struggles would have been completely different than a woman coming here with absolutely no one. But you took the time to find someone to know before you came. But after the Civil War, of course, you know, Horace Greeley's famous line, "Go West, young man," also applied to women. So after the war, a lot of black women would migrated for different reasons and ended up in the West. A lot of them came as governesses to bring children whose parents had already come here and gotten established. So then they would be hired from maybe St. Louis, and then they would bring the children to the parents, and then they would stay and get jobs. One of these ladies was Mary Fields. We'll talk about Mary. That's
all right.
Most people know her as Stagecoach Mary. There's a lot of things that have been written about her, but some of them are inaccurate. The ones that depict her as being a horrible type person, because she drank and she smoked. She smoked cigars. She drank. She was as big as a man. She was 6 foot tall, 200 pounds. She wore men's clothing, usually had a skirt over top of men's pants, and men's shoes and those kinds of things. And she was a slave, and when she was set free, she went to work on the Mississippi River, excuse me,
Okay.
on the Mississippi River on a steamboat. And she met a man who offered her a job taking care of his children, helping his wife. So she goes with this family, and the wife dies. So the husband sends the kids to a convent in Toledo, Ohio. So she goes to Toledo with the kids, stays there, just admires one of the nuns there, Mother Amadeus, who ends up being sent to Mouse City, Montana, and they had to stay in a barn. They didn't have any provisions or place for them at that time. Mary ends up coming out here because Mother Amadeus develops pneumonia. So Mary comes out and nurses her back to health, and after a while they are sent up to the Cascade area, and they start a school up there called at St. Mary's. Mary goes along because she stays with Mother Amadeus, and it was Mary who does most of the work to build the convent and everything up there. Now things are going pretty good, everybody knew, the nuns were always trying to get Mary to accept God, to accept Christ as her Savior. And so she would always put it off all the time, So one day she is hauling freight. Now you have to realize she's an older lady. She's in her 80s maybe at this time, and she's hauling freight. And some wolves attack, and the freight wagon falls over. So she's out here all night long alone without a gun, and there's wolves around. So she finally waits at daylight, walks to the convent. She gets there, and she tells the nuns to get the white dress out because she's going to let them baptize her now, because God had saved her from them wolves that night before. So Mary did get baptized. So we know she did get baptized. And, she knew about God, and she had a really kind heart. And the way that you know that the negative things that are written about her are false is that the town of Cascade honors her and always honored her while she was alive. She babysat everybody in the town when they were kids. She had a laundry, she had a cafe, and she was kind-hearted because she would let the miners come in and she would let them charge. So one day, a guy who owed her a lot of money was out bragging around, I guess, about how much he had and what he was doing with all the, I guess, gold he was digging out of the ground or whatever. But he had not bothered to pay Mary. So Mary goes out. He's walking down. He walks past a saloon. She goes out, grabs him by the back of his shirt, pulls him towards her, hits him with one lick. He's out cold. She goes back in the saloon, sits down, and does this and says, his debt is now paid. So that was one of the reasons that some of the men went to the bishop of the state of Montana and complained about Mary and said that no woman that was like her, that could fight like a man, drink like a man, and cuss like a man, should be staying at a convent. So the bishop told the sisters that she had to go. So they took her to town, and they're the ones that got her set up in her first business. They helped her get everything going. But Mary was so kind-hearted, she never ended up, being rich or having a lot of money. But this is one thing that she had to have been good to the people there. Any day, she could wake up and say, today is going to be my birthday. And when that happened, the whole town shut down, the school was closed, and they would have a parade in her honor for her birthday. Now, no town is going to do that for a woman that some people have written about and said was a horrible person.
Exactly.
You know that in order for a town to completely shut down and for them to let kids out of school, to have a parade for somebody who says today is going to be my birthday, because of course her being a slave, she did not know exactly when she was born. She knew the approximate year she was born, but outside of that did not know what day she was born. I have tried to find records of the Mississippi steamboats, and doing research takes a lot of time, and it's very hard. And I'll tell you that here in Montana, we have a very, very rich black history, both men and women. And the thing is that most of these things occurred in smaller towns. Cascade is a very small town, but they still honor Mary. And if you can contact the library there, it's called the Wadsworth, I think it's Wadsworth Memorial Library, but it's the only library in Cascade, Montana. And they are very proud of Mary having lived there. The town there's a huge boulder that is her tombstone, that has her name engraved in it and her date of birth and death. And the town takes care of her gravesite and always have. They decorate her grave and keep flowers on it all the time. I've been there and taken pictures, and I don't think I have those available right now. But hopefully at some point I'll be able to get them to the apostle and she'll be able to show them to you.
That would be awesome.
But Mary was just a very unique individual. When she was 90, she took a job as a postmaster or postman. So she was the oldest person to ever be hired as a postal worker to deliver mail. And to be a woman, and when you think about the ruggedness of those days and what it would have entailed for her to be alone at night, often traveling from one town to the next with just horses and a buggy, or a flatboard, buckboard, would not have been something that I think I could have done. Because even having a car with air conditioning, it is still rugged here. I love hiking, and even though my body at this point doesn't always love it, I still like going out camping. And hopefully maybe this summer I'll take Apostle up and we can do some filming at where my favorite campsite is.
That would be awesome.
Montana is a wonderful place. In 1992, the New York Times did a story about me living here. And this was my quote in that story that has been republished in several other periodicals, including Jet Magazine. And I said that here in Montana, they hate the Indians first, then they hate the Mexicans. And by the time they get around to us, they're just too tired to deal with it. The truth of the matter is we're only 1% here. So that we're not seen as a threat of any type or of any kind. There are a lot of black professionals that come here. A lot of the Fortune 500 companies send their young black executives here to do their training, and then they go off to larger cities.
Wow.
My kids and I would often take young men that were here with AT&T and ExxonMobil and those types of places. We would often befriend them, take them to church, take them out to the ranch. At that time I lived out on the ranch. We'd take them out on the ranch, make them feel at home, because there's so few. Then there were a lot fewer then than there are now. So when you're really young, it can be difficult when you're going to a place that has a complete different culture than what you're accustomed to. And for some people, it is not comfortable. And for some people, it is difficult to adjust to. And that was even true back in the old days. And one example of that is the lady that was the founder of the city of Belt, Montana. If you look up Belt, Montana, you will find that the mother of Belt was an African-American lady named Maddie Castner. Now, Maddie came here as well. She had been a slave as well. And she came here to Montana, and she ends up starting a stagecoach stop that is in between Lewistown and Great Falls. And that stagecoach stop eventually turns into the town of Belt, Montana. When you go to Belt, the streets are named for her, so it's quite exuberating to me to go, and here's a town where a lot of the streets are, like Maddie East or West, or Castner East or West, or North or South. And how exciting that is to know that the town claims her as the mother of Belt. She was famous for her cream peas, which I do not like. Please don't send me no cream. I do not like cream peas. I think my mother just made them too thick and I just couldn't stand it. So I didn't like cream peas, but she was famous for cream peas, and people would travel over 100 miles to go to her restaurant and stagecoach stop. It ended up being a huge building that had a lot of winding hallways in it. And she grew most of her own vegetables that she cooked, and she hunted herself. She was married. Now, most people think that if black women come here, they're going to be marrying buffalo soldiers. That is not the case. I have not found any yet in my studies that married a buffalo soldier. They have all married to white men. And most of those men came from the northeast part of America, a lot of them from the Massachusetts area. And it's very interesting to think that at the turn of the 20th century, here in Montana, you had people of different races that were married and being married. It was not acceptable in a lot of places. For example, a lot of people don't realize this, but if Montana had come into the Union, or would have come into America, be part of America before the Civil War ended, they would have gone in as a Confederate state. And the reason for that was there was a lot of people that had come from the Confederacy up here because there was gold here. And I was telling Apostle that there's a shipment of gold that's been missing. And I have said since I found out about it that I'm finding it. Because for a long time you couldn't own gold. The government wouldn't let you have gold, but they changed that. So now if I find it, I can have it, hopefully. But that shipment of gold was on its way to the Confederacy, and the train was robbed. And some of the information that I found has said that they think it's somewhere around the Laurel area, which is where I am, So that's why I think I should be able to just dig in the backyard, and I should find the gold out here, and then be able to use it for whatever it is that God would want me to use it for. When you look at women and you think about, their lives were harsh when they were living in slavery, and you know what things were like. But the example about how people had a hard time adjusting even back then was Maddie Castner, the founder of Belt, Montana. She went back east and found her brother and found a sister. Wow. And brought them out here to Montana. But they couldn't deal with the lifestyle, so they went back to the east. When you think about the fact that most of us don't know that a fourth of all the cowboys was black. People don't know that bulldogging was invented by a black man. A lot the cowboys know, or the people who are in the rodeo know this. And there's a stamp that was made for him. In fact, it should be in that booklet that I gave you. Okay. And I'll tell you what's funny about that. The story that's funny about that is the government put his brother's picture on the stamp by mistake because they thought it was him and it was his brother. So then they had to, I think those stamps are probably worth quite a bit of money today. So then they had to redo the stamps with the right guy's picture on. I won't say we all look alike.
Me either.
But the history in Montana, and it's really interesting because when you run into people in any city, they'll know somebody that you know. Or they'll ask you if do you know so-and-so and so-and-so? No, I don't know them. Or, yes, I do. I've met them, Mm-hmm. And it's amazing, especially like if you go to a lot of the revivals and stuff. And I'm going to tell you, we had big people that would come out here to the reservation. But into town, into Billings, very sad. Well, most of them, when they fly in, they have to fly into Billings. And when they fly into Billings, they say, there's a dark cloud over this area. And I go, yeah, I do know that. There is a dark cloud over this area. And I believe it has to do with the land having been stolen from the natives and them cursing it.
Yeah. All the blood that was spilled. Yep.
And I think because of that, and there's not been any repentance. Mm-hmm. Like in the East, A lot of the cities are repenting about how the city had treated some of its citizens. That's never happened with the natives. That, you don't hear them talking about Muddy Creek or any of the other other massacres that occurred, and saying how wrong that was. You don't hear anything about that. And like since we've always been so few. If you only got 1%, when the segregation laws came out, where you had to have separate schools, got to have separate everything. Well, superintendent of schools here in Billings went to the state and said, "Hey, we can't do that in Billings. We don't have enough money to have a separate school for maybe 5 kids." How would that make? And you have to realize how many people. There wouldn't have been a lot of people out. We still don't have a lot of people out here. Mm-hmm. We're the 3rd largest state land-wise, but our population is, we barely have 1 million people in the whole state. So that's why we're getting another seat now. I think we went over the 1 million mark finally. But when you realize how big the state is,
yeah.
It's huge. But the issue is water. This is a high plains desert. And people think because Montana has mountains that we're not, but this is considered a high plains desert. That when you get over, you got to go over further to get to the Rockies. But over here, when you go east of here, to me, it looks like you're on a desert when you get over to like North Dakota.
Oh, wow.
It does not, it's really flat, dry, no trees, It's in Plentywood. They call it Plentywood because they got a tree up there. So that's why the name of the town is Plentywood, because they got 1 tree. I didn't. One of you's gonna get that. Yeah, they got a tree, 1 tree, so they called it Plentywood.
Wow.
No, that's a joke. They got more than 1 tree, but they did. The reason the town is called Plentywood is because there was trees there. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, it's a high plains desert. But if you're not into outdoor stuff, there's no point in coming. Because we don't have a lot of other activities here. We do have symphony, and we don't really have a ballet company. But we do have some things, some cultural type things, but not black cultural type things. There used to be one bar years ago.
I was going to ask you that. Is there a bar? Is there a black restaurant?
No. There used to be, the Skid Row bars, but they never were really black. The Standard, a lot of people went to the Standard bar years ago. This would have been in the 80s. But there never was really a black club since I've lived here. I think they had things in the 60s, but because they had the women's clubs. All the major cities in Montana had a black women's club. And they had a Phyllis Wheatley branch of the Y here. I don't know where it was or, how it operated. But they did have that here. But and they used to have a scholarship that they did. So I think what happened is what happens with most organizations. You look at the VFW, you look at the Elks, you look at any of those organizations, and they're dying out because young people won't join. And I think that's exactly what happened with these black women's groups in Montana, that the younger people did not see a need to belong to the group. And so once those older ladies got to the point to where it was not that many, they were dying off.
No one to pass the baton to.
No. And so...
So is there anything here in Billings for black women?
No.
Wow.
No, there's a few. You got to be careful about who you go get your hair done with, because I have several friends that are hairdressers, and they told me, they said, "Gwen, all we have in our books about black hair is 1 paragraph. That's it." And so most of them labor under the apprehension that our hair is strong, but it's not. Our hair is more fragile. So you got to be careful who you go to get your hair done.
Yeah, I've experienced that in my short time here, and I'm grateful that I finally found right next door to me the Montana training school. And the ladies, when I came in, I said, "Listen, I need my hair cut." She asked me where I went. I told her. She said, "Oh yeah, I know that lady." And I said, "Listen, you got to do this right." And matter of fact, she said, "Well, do you have the measurements?" And my barber from New York, thank God, he sent me that information. I pulled it up. She said, "Okay, a 2 or 3, no problem." She said, "Then I want you to know something." She said, "I have biracial children, so I understand." I said, "Praise the Lord."
Yeah.
And she did a great job on my hair. I'm so grateful. So that's where I will be going to continue getting my hair cut. Because you're right, these little things mean a big difference to us.
People don't realize, because now when I first got here, I went and had my hair done at a beauty school. So I went to get a straightener, and so they tried to do a reverse perm. So, like a reverse perm. This ain't no perm. There ain't nothing to reverse here. So now, of course, they're supposed to be the professionals, and I don't know nothing about hair.
Mm-hmm.
So they had me come back like 2 days later, I think, and then did the straightener. I ended up with 2nd-degree burns in my head.
Wow.
Up on the top, back here in the back, and it festered.
Wow.
Didn't know if my hair was gonna come back in those spots.
Right.
So I went to another hairdresser friend. The Montgomery Wards had a beauty shop there, and no, J.C. Penney's had a beauty shop. So I went there, and he says, "Oh, Gwen, there's nothing we can do but cut it all off."
Mm-hmm.
So I leave home with hair about this long, and when I come back, it was your length.
Hallelujah. Good new growth.
Wait a minute. My husband didn't say a word. He didn't say a word. Till months later when I decided, when my hair's grown out and I'm deciding I'm going to go get my hair done. And he said, "Are you going to come back bald again?" He didn't say anything at the time, but I guess it did bother him. But he didn't say a word about it.
He was wise. He already knew that was a sore subject for you.
Oh yeah, I know he did. I know he knew I was not a happy camper. So then my best friend was Rod Killenhofer, and he was the top hairdresser in this town. He had a waiting list 6 months to a year for you to get your hair done there. He had 5 shampoo girls, and then he just walked around. He was making. Now, this is back in the 80s. He was making over $100,000 a year.
Wow.
Doing hair. That's what he was making. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the shampoo girls and the rest of them people was making, but he was making over $100,000 a year. And he was such a nice person. He was the first person in the state of Montana to get AIDS.
Wow.
And he died. And he went from making 100. Now, he did my hair natural. He cut it, right? So when I got back east, I went and got it straightened. It was perfect. The people at the school, because I went to Kentucky Beauty School, the people at the beauty school, she had everybody in the whole school come and look at my hair after they straightened it. Because when it was curly, it was when they were doing the asymmetric stuff. So this side was up here, but it was totally blunt. There wasn't one hair longer. But when it was curly like this, to me, but when they straightened it, they said, "Who cut your hair?" I said, "Oh, my best friend in Montana." And his goal was to be the beautician to the movie stars.